Okay, Shaun Webb here, another Gears video analysis. Today we're going to take a professional PGA Tour player and an amateur and look at the key differences in some of their body motion. I took an amateur at a classic, I guess kind of out over the top, steep downswing and really scoopy impact, adding a lot of loft at the ball. So let's go ahead and look at that from face on. You can see him adding loft through impact, really no dynamic movement to the lower body at all. And let's look at the professional from face on. So totally different look to the impact position, de-lofting the club slightly, a lot more dynamic movement to the lower body. So let's go from down the line. And let's take the tour player back to the top and down to the ball. And the amateur up to the top, really steep out over. A lot of like an early extension of the body and then into the finish. So let's, instead of just looking at the swing plane of the club, which I think normally is assessed, let's look at the body movements that are causing the over the top move or this particular pattern, because it's more than just putting the club in the right place. I think where a lot of people, or golfers, miss out is they just try to put the golf club in the right place without any concern with the body movements that are causing the club to go where it goes. So I think you can go down some really incorrect roads just focused on club movement. So let's talk about the body motion. So let's pull up something here, the bend graph. So tour player on the right, let's focus on this pelvis bend number. All this means is his belt buckle right now is pointed toward the ground 11.7 degrees. So he's tilted forward at address, 11.7 degrees, and he goes up to the top. You're going to see that number come out some because he's turning, and he's also adding some side tilt to the pelvis. So at the top of the swing, he's 5.8 degrees of forward bend. So his belt buckle is still pointed to the ground slightly, which is common position for a tour player to be in, a good player at the top of the swing. Now, here's what you're going to see with the amateur. He's not bent quite enough or as much from his pelvis forward, but he's at almost 8 degrees. The difference is, as he goes back, he's going to lose all of his bend to the pelvis and go negative. So his belt is pointed to the sky slightly, basically. So he's tucked his rear end under and stretched out his upper body, basically, stretched out his abdominals, to the point where he's got a negative pelvis bend number. Now that's important because you're going to see when he starts down, because he's done that with his body, he almost has to do a crunching motion on the downswing to kind of reverse that. And when he does that, he slings his club out over the target line and into a steep, kind of classic over the top position. So because he's bent backwards or he's got his pelvis in negative bend, he has to change that or try to change that, and he ends up doing a crunch, and he actually makes it even worse. He keeps tucking it under even more. So he's increased the amount that he's tucked his rear end under, even down to this last parallel in the swing position. So the tour player is going to be 11 degrees at address, about 6 at the top. You're going to see he keeps his belt pointed toward the ground slightly until through the impact area. Then he would finally lose it as he posterior tilts with his lower body or his pelvis. But that motion of the pelvis for this player would be the place to start, instead of just trying to get this player to work on swing plane or work on a better impact or release. If you missed out on this kind of key movement where he goes from forward bend to actually backward bend to the pelvis, or negative bend, and then keeps on adding negative bend to the pelvis all the way down into the bottom here, you're missing out on what's actually causing that over the top swing to happen. Now, as one more kind of key area we would look at here, let's take these guys up to the top and just put them there for a second. If I can find what I'm looking for. So the other key area would be a side bend number. I've talked about this in another video, but as this tour player comes down, we can look at the side bend numbers. Side bend of the pelvis 10 degrees, rib cage 37, just means he's tilted toward the ground with his body. As he comes down to this last parallel position, last parallel of the club, pelvis is 5.8 degrees of side bend, so his right hip is slightly lower than his left, and he's got his rib cage basically level to the ground at this point. So he's got a little bit of right side bend in his trunk and rib cage, and then you'll see as he goes into the ball, he increases that right side bend of his rib cage all the way to impact. If I can find impact, there it is. 21 degrees at impact with the rib cage side bend, so his right shoulder has moved towards his right hip as he's opened his body up. And the amateur player, let's go to last parallel, he's got something totally different going on here in his side bend. His pelvis is still in left side bend, so or left pelvic tilt. So he's got -2 degrees. His left side of his pelvis is still lower than his right. And although he has his rib cage fairly level there, what you're going to see into the ball is totally different in the side bend number. So let's pull him down to impact. Side bend of his rib cage at impact, he's got, let's pull it back here, 12.5 degrees, and the tour player has 21. That's a massive difference. And the pelvis at this point is basically level with the average golfer or amateur, and the tour player has 9.6 degrees of right side bend or right pelvic tilt. So the right side of the pelvis is lower than the left in the better player. So these are things that you can't overlook when you're looking at a slicer. All these body movements he's putting in or not putting in are causing a lot of these issues with the way this club is moving. So I hope that helps. I wanted to highlight kind of the anatomy of a over-the-top move. And to me, just looking at this player, when I had him in for a lesson, those were the things that stood out to create that movement pattern. So hope that helps. If you have any questions, let me know. Leave them in the comments below. But to me, when you're working on your swing, start to look a little deeper than just the club movement and try to understand the body movements a little bit better, and I think you'll be on the right track. So again, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to help you out, or if anything else you'd like to see in the golf swing, I can do that as well. Thank you.